from the state of California. Ms. Lee, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Today, we will vote on my amendment, Lee 41, to the Fiscal 22 Defense Authorization Act to reduce from this year's bill egregious Pentagon spending increases, that were added during the committee markup. Our amendment will reduce no less than $25.5 billion from the bill, trimming back the total level of FY NDAA to no more than the amount requested by the President. And I want to thank my co-sponsors, starting with Congresswoman Jacobs, for her tremendous leadership, who was so kind to manage this amendment on the floor yesterday. I also thank my co-chair of the Defense Spending Reduction Caucus, Mr. Pocan, as well as Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, for working together to bring this amendment to the floor. Also to Chairman Smith and Mr. McGovern for their support in helping to make this very important amendment in order. The President's budget request is one of the largest in American history. For years now, the United States has been peerless in its military spending, exceeding the total spending of the next 11 countries combined. We have numerous glaring examples of waste, fraud, and abuse within our defense establishment. Our 20-year experience in Afghanistan is a stark example where the Special Inspector General for Afghan Reconstruction identified billions of dollars, mind you, billions of dollars wasted or outright stolen over our time there. The taxpayers deserve better. And yet Congress insists on piling more money into the Pentagon than our military leaders even asked for, despite DOD routinely returning unspent balances to the Treasury. Enough is enough. Americans are demanding that Congress rebalance our priorities and invest in the biggest challenges America faces. We face imminent threats from the COVID pandemic, climate change, domestic terrorism, growing inequality, and systemic racial and ethnic inequities. So while I personally support a much larger reduction in Pentagon spending, we need to draw the line somewhere. This amendment is a good place to start. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment to send the message that Congress won't endorse constant inflation of the Pentagon budget. Also, let me just ask and cite Amendment 40, offered again this year by Mr. Pocan and myself, for a 10% cut. I thank our colleagues, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, for her bold leadership and for managing this amendment during the floor debate. Mr. Speaker, the House stands again poised to pour $750 billion into a defense establishment that is unauditable, unaccountable, and does little to answer the biggest threats to the safety and welfare of our people. The Pentagon is the only federal department that has never passed an audit. I worked to get a requirement that DOD pass an audit written into permanent law a couple of years ago with the help of Chairman Smith and my colleague, Dr. Burgess. And yet still, the Pentagon says it won't be able to pass an audit for almost another decade. It's not hard to find places to cut at the Pentagon. Earlier this year, a bipartisan group of organizations identified $80 billion in savings that could be achieved just by implementing some efficiencies and eliminating obsolete weapons. Weapons like Cold War-era bombs and missiles designed and built in the last century that are totally unsuited for the challenges of this century. We see tremendous costs of this runaway spending, not only in the missing priorities like public health that are left unfunded, but in a way of thinking that militarizes every single problem in our society and turns peaceful protesters into targets for weapons of war. Let me just say, this modest reduction that we're proposing, it won't compromise our national security, and it won't take a dollar from our troops. In fact, it'll put more resources into enhancing the quality of life for our troops. It will also allow us to reinvest in healthcare, schools, and infrastructure. This amendment will be a first step in rebalancing our priorities to build a safe, peaceful, prosperous world at home and abroad. So I urge my colleagues to join us and to vote yes on this amendment, and let's start shifting our budget back to things that matter for most of our people. Thank you again, and I yield the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentlewoman from North Carolina, Ms. Fox, for 5 minutes.